injury-free
I'm
besides
definitely
that black eye.
excited to compete. Really excited to get out there and scrap. I like how more frequent my fights have been, which is a good sign that my body's holding up.
Stupid blanket.
Yeah, so I'm excited to get out there and scrap and hopefully not get another black eye.
Talk to us about Court McGee, a fellow veteran like yourself, has been around for a while and he's still fighting at 40. What do you make of this matchup, and is this the type of fight that you wanted?
It's just a fight that came to me. We wanted to fight him in Seattle, and things just didn't come to fruition, and then they came to me with Court. I welcome the matchup. I think it's more challenging of a matchup than the
saying Court McGee will be a good one.
Have it pegged as. I think that Court's going to challenge me in the wrestling and the grappling and bring that type of pressure. I'm very well prepared for a 15-minute fight, but that doesn't mean that I'm not going to look for my opportunities to pursue a finish. And his body of work is impressive. He's been around for a very, very long time. Got a tremendous amount of respect for the guy. Obviously, him winning the Ultimate Fighter is a part of that, and just everything he's overcame in his life. And it's nice laying it on the line against guys that you have a lot of respect for. So, yeah, I'm excited for the matchup and look to just kind of keep the ball rolling and stay more active. And it all starts with Saturday night.
Yeah. And I guess what's the drive now at this stage of your fighting career? Is it just to keep busy while the body still holds up? You can still do this? I mean, is it a job after all, right? Like, you are getting paid for this? Or is there something else that drives you to continue fighting?
I mean, just like anybody in any sport, any athlete, I just love competition. I love to fight. And, I've been with the same coach my entire career. And he would have very honest conversations with me if it was time to slow down. And we've talked about this as I've gotten older in my career. Rick's always said, if I'm not looking good in the gym, if I'm taking too many shots, if I'm not able to perform, he would be very honest with me. And I think that that's part of a benefit of being with somebody for so long, is they just know you. So for me, I love to compete. I'm still winning. Who's to say I can't, win this fight, win another one, get another shot in the rankings? I'm no Michael Bisping. I'm not Daniel Cormier, but those guys achieved a lot of great things in the late stages of their career. And if I didn't feel like I could beat the best guys in the world, I wouldn't continue to do this. I wouldn't put myself in harm's way like this. Like you said, I have a career after this, and I'm very thankful that I have that, because I get to maintain my identity of being a fighter for the rest of my life because of that. So I'm here surely for the love of the game. I love to compete, and I'm not even going to bring up the R word. My Uncle Joe always says, don't even talk about it. You just take it fight by fight. And as long as you feel good and mentally and physically,
Sugar Sean O'Malley reveals timeline for Octagon returned after UFC 316 amid calls for a move to featherweight.
I love the game, and I love balancing the both worlds. I get a lot of joy being in training camp and having to fly all over the country and all over the world and having to train and do desk shows while balancing training camp. And a lot of people always ask, is that too much? And I said, it's not enough. I would take on more. So
I like that. He just likes to work. I like that.
And I get a lot of enjoyment out of that.
Yeah. Are there things that you want to accomplish as whatever's left in your career? Is there certain things? I know you called to fight on the Seattle card and stuff, but is there any opponents or any little things you would like to check off?
Obviously, I'd like to beat Damian Maia's rear naked choke record. I didn't even know that was a thing until after the Max Griffin fight, and they brought it up.
What's he at?
I think he's at 7, and I'm at 5 or something like that. But I had no idea that I was up in the mix. I just assumed Charles Oliveira just takes the cake for everything in terms of submissions. But after the Max Griffin fight, they said, you're tied for second with Kenny Florian, with Damian Maia at the top. And so that's small things like that. And obviously, if I didn't believe I'm still one of the best guys in the world, I believe I could beat anybody at 170 pounds on any given day. That title aspiration is always going to be in the back of my mind, especially when I'm performing the way that I have been, especially in the gym. So, it's just things like that. I don't have to chase a paycheck. I got life after fighting. I have a broadcasting career that will do more than enough to keep me afloat. So I'm surely here for the love of the game.
Yeah. I think a lot of people are now probably going to go hit the sports book at Michael Chiesa submission now with those comments.
Well, the problem is a good problem. Court McGee has never been submitted. So I'm not going to make a fool of myself by putting myself in bad positions to try to chase a submission, especially one particular one. That would be foolish against a guy like Court. He's very durable. I've heard the stories of him in the gym. He's impossible to submit. He's got gills if you strap on a choke. So it's like, will I look for those opportunities when they present themselves? Absolutely. Will I take them as they come? Absolutely. But I'm not going to try to force something because I'm pursuing Damian Maia's record. I mean, it's not like it's something that's when I wake up in the morning, like, all right, we got to train to beat Damian Maia's record, you know, but it's just like little things like that, little goals that you can kind of push yourself towards and you know, just try to achieve and accomplish that are nice, extra fuel for the fire.
And lastly, for me, you had called out Colby Covington, and a lot of fans got behind that idea. It seemed like an appropriate fight to make for both of you. Whatever happened, did the matchmakers even reach out? Was there even a step towards making that fight?
I don't know if I can really divulge too much. I can say that the powers that be liked the idea. DC and Chael actually really liked it a lot. But, you know, the higher-ups loved the idea of it. And I thought it would have been a great ending to The Ultimate Fighter, but I'm just kind of giving up on calling the guy out. Like, I think that he's going to go a different direction with his career. I think being a streamer is kind of what he's pursuing right now. I don't really think that he's got the desire to compete as much as he did before. So it's just time to move on, you know, let him do what he wants to do. And if he fights again, he fights again. I'm just focused on Court.
Oh, you got Kevin Holland.
Just kind of moving him out of the equation.
I'd much rather see Holland and
I just think it would have been a great
Chiesa.
finale for The Ultimate Fighter, and you know, it's his loss, and I think it's the fans' loss too. I think it would have been a good fight. I think it would have been a lot of fun.
Juliana Pena
he brings a
out
lot of heat with the way he builds his fights, and I think I have the style to beat him in a way that he's never been beat before. But move on. Yeah. It's over. Whatever. Next.
Best of luck, and thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Michael. Just since you brought it up, for reference, Damian Maia has 8. Also neck crank.
And what am I, at 5 or 6?
You're at 7.
I'm at 7.
Oh, shit, he's at
right
7.
There.
Okay, all right.
And because you also mentioned him, Charles Oliveira has 6. So, you know, he might be coming for you.
Yeah. Charles Oliveira has
Oliveira.
He should
Fuck
have
that
every
guy.
submission record in the book by the time he's done fighting, I'm assuming. So, guy's incredible.
I mean, I don't mean fuck that guy. He's a good fighter,
To keep
but
it similarly fun
I
here,
don't think he deserves the title
I
fight.
believe this is your 4th fellow Ultimate Fighter winner you will be facing. You are 3-0. Does that add any pressure to be the ultimate fighter?
I mean, some would say Brad Katona's the ultimate fighter because he won it twice.
True.
But
Brad
it's
Katona.
not pressure. It's a privilege. Like, I think it's fun to get out there
cool.
and, like, you know, winning the Ultimate Fighter is not a championship belt. You don't really defend the title, but for somebody that has won the Ultimate Fighter, it's like I do kind of, I perceive it as that. Like, I think it's like I'm putting, you know, my trophy up against his, you know, tough champ versus tough champ. And it would be nice to go out there and beat Court, be kind of clean out every Ultimate Fighter champ left in my division, except for Usman, but he's way at the top, and I don't think that fight ever happens. But you know, I always welcome those matchups. I think it makes the matchup a little more fun.
And then obviously you face Brad Katona next, right? For the belt. Bantamweight or not, who cares?
Say again?
You face Brad Katona next for the Ultimate Fighter title.
I think I win that fight on size alone.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Hey, Michael.
Hey.
So you've spent a good amount of time behind the desk now as an analyst. Has that changed how you see the fight game at all, just because you have to think of it from a different angle?
I'll tell you this. Being an analyst and having to spend so much time studying fights, I'm very keen on how the sport's evolving. And going back to what I said about when people ask if it's too much, if it's beneficial, if it's a detriment, doing the broadcasting work, there's such thing as visual reps and mental reps, and I'm seeing the sport evolve as I'm studying these young fighters and seeing how they approach the fight game, the techniques they use, and just, for me, I feel like I see the way the sport's evolving from a different lens because I have to be so attentive to the sport.
As I had stated,
there's a big difference
I was going to
between
talk
watching a fight
about
as a
Umar
fan,
Nurmagomedov. Hold on,
which
let me
I'm
get
a
out of
fan
this
first, and watching
Come on,
a fight
MMA
when
junkie.
you turn off the
Okay,
commentary,
thank
you
you.
have
I
nobody around,
mentioned
and you're just like hovering over your laptop. Like, that's the way I approach my studying. I don't like to listen to the commentary. I like to come up with my I like to analyze the fights myself without any
I
voices
mentioned that
steering me a
I
different
want
way.
Peter Yan and
So when
Chigashan to have
you
a second
silence
fight.
the
I think the first.
and you just watch it for what it is with no one around, I feel like you really get to see more of what these young guys are doing, how the sport's evolving. And I'm just really keen
I
on
mentioned that I
how the
want Peter
sport's
Yan
gonna
and
be in
Chigashan.
terms of how these people fight, how these fighters perform. You know, over the course of the next 5 years, I think we're going to see
I mentioned that I want Peter Yan and Chigashan to have a second.
To see guys like me and Court who are past 35 that are still competing at a high level. I think it's going to become a lot
I want
like
Peter
the
Yan and
NFL.
Chigashan.
We're seeing a lot more young guys come into the UFC, and you can only compete at a really high level against the best fighters in the world for so long. I think it works for us.
I mentioned that I want Peter Yan and Chigashan to have a second fight.
I think
the first fight was
and there's going to be a lot more youth at the top of the heap.
I mentioned that I want Peter Yan and Chigashan to have a second fight. I think the first fight was really.
And you talk about how you've been doing this for a while, and was there a moment when you realized that maybe broadcasting was something you were good at and something you were
I
doing?
mentioned that I want
John
Peter Yan
that kind of planted the seed a long time ago. It was on The Ultimate Fighter. I never thought of it before I got in the UFC. My sole focus was I want to win Ultimate Fighter. I want to get to the UFC. And he just kind of gave me a couple compliments saying I was good on the other side of the camera and I spoke well and just said a few things to me that kind of planted that seed that I wanted to get into broadcasting. And it's funny because I started to get a little brash on the microphone, and I think I called Kenny Florian out one time on social media. All respect to Kenny. I think he's an incredible fighter, great commentator, great analyst, but I started kind of trying to call my shots and kind of put it out there, and everything came to fruition. But as time has gone on and I've started to kind of get really comfortable in that position, it's definitely something that's like I'm very, very passionate about. I think that for me, if I wasn't in this position doing the broadcasting work, when my career comes to an end, I think I'd feel like it was for nothing and a total failure if I didn't win a world title. But now I'm in this position where I'm pursuing a different goal outside of competition. And I think that if I get signed to become a UFC commentator, and I feel like I'm on my way there, I feel like that would validate my efforts. We've had probably, well over 1,000 UFC champions. We've probably only had, maybe 20 or 30 UFC commentators. So I feel like if I could crack that lineup, I think it would really validate my body of work and what I've done in the sport. And there's nothing guaranteed there. I still have a lot of work to do to get to that position.
Maybe on like a couple fight nights, but nothing big.
Once again, just kind of going back to those goals that I'm pursuing. So, yeah, it's something I'm very, very passionate about.
Yeah, last one for me. Would you consider it like your way to pass on knowledge to the fans and other fighters that might be watching?
Yeah, I do. I do feel like that's a good way to pass on my knowledge and the way I perceive the sport and the things that I see, because everybody's different. You sit at the desk with Anthony Smith, Alan Jouban, Rashad Evans, just any of those people. We all don't see the same things, and we're all right in our own ways because it's just a matter of opinion and perception. So I like to pass along my knowledge to the fans. I like to pass along the knowledge to my teammates, especially these young guys that are coming up, especially because, like I said, I'm seeing this sport from a different lens than you would as a fighter.
Back in the news.
So it's great to pass along the knowledge, but I still learn a lot. I mean, when you sit next to Dean Thomas at the desk and you listen to how he breaks these fights down and what he sees, I'm learning on the job
Alex
as well.
Piera.
So while I'm passing along
back
the
in
knowledge,
the
I'm
news.
also gaining it as well.
The homie Alex Piera.
Mike,
whatever.
you talked about it a little bit earlier. You said, this new generation, some of them are just like freak athletes. Like
The
as a
homie
guy
Alex
that's
Piera.
been in this game for a minute, and you fought
back in the
kind of the
news.
generation
Hold
that
on, let
were, we had a lot of guys that were brawlers and that were just tough guys, and would just
The
kind
homie
of thug
Alex
it out in
Piera.
there. How
He's back in the
frustrating
news.
is it, like,
Hold on, let
coming
me-
from that generation and then seeing these new guys in the gym that might not necessarily
The homie
understand
Alex
the
Piera.
technique, but because they're
He's
just
back
such
in the news.
high-level athletes, they're able to do those things.
Well, that's something that really, if that falls on the shoulders of how they reciprocate the way that they're coached and their coaching staff, like maybe some of these guys that don't fight to, maybe they have all the physical gifts and all the athletic abilities, but they're not executing techniques in a proper way because they lean on their athleticism. I will say this, you're going to have a short shelf life in the UFC. Like, athleticism and natural gifts can only get you so far. You have to have a work ethic and you have to have good technique.
Ankalaev, or will he
But it
fight
also
somebody
falls
else?
on the shoulders
The
of the
assumption
coach.
would
Like,
be
maybe
he'd fight
is the
Ankalaev.
coach adequate teaching them the right stuff? Are they not able to get through to their athletes? There's a lot of kind of moving parts to that. But that's a big part in what I'm seeing in the sport now is we're not seeing as many of these guys that just kind of draw a line in the sand and just want to stand toe-to-toe and brawl. That's kind of that's part of the foundation the UFC was built on, the Tank Abbotts of the world and things like that. But now we're not seeing as many guys do that, and that's great. That's the evolution of the sport. I think a big part of that is we're seeing kids go to MMA class and start MMA at 5 years old, and then by the time they're 20, 21 years old, they've got 15, 16 years of experience, 15, 16 years of training and doing all the martial arts. I think that that's a big part of that paradigm shift that we're seeing. But I think that really when it comes down to fighters being less disciplined, it's either them and their stubbornness, or it's maybe they don't have a coach that's coaching them right, or really finding a way to get through to them in the way that they need to be taught.
And then kind of going off of that, do you think at a certain point it could almost hurt an athlete the way that they're so focused on, the athleticism and the techniques, but they kind of forget to promote themselves at the same time? Like, do you think winning is going to be good enough for some of these guys? Because I feel like the sport is missing the guys that would go out there and talk trash. They might not have been the best technique-wise and athletically, but we want to see them fight because they make the most noise.
Yeah, that's a great question. That's something that Dean and I talked about a few shows back when we worked together, how there should be, we used to have these athlete summits, and this is before we had like 700 people on the roster. But fighters should be taught on how to build their brand. I think a lot of that revolves around authenticity. It's like, kind of circling back to Colby Covington. Like, Colby's actually a really nice guy off camera. He's just a total dickhead when he's in front of a camera. And that can only work for so long, and only so many people can really do that. But I think that building a brand and making yourself promotable involves like authenticity. Like, who are you as a person? Like, when you get up here in front of media day, how boring is it to hear the same shit?
Article
I had a
of
good
the day,
camp. I'm in the best shape of my life.
Dana
It's like,
White hasn't
no,
renewed
tell us
MMA
more. We want
stars.
to know more about you, more about your story. And maybe it's also they need to be asked the right questions, and I think that being authentic and true to who you are and promoting that's going to get through to certain people. But when it gets to being brash, there is a certain aspect of like having to promote fights. Like the way Bilal and JDM kind of went at each other. Like, JDM doesn't really seem to be a guy that kind of talks too much trash, but he did the right thing. He's in the right position. You're in a title fight. You got to promote this thing. So I think that when it gets to being in those marquee slots, you got to promote yourself. But I think that these young guys need to be taught on how to promote their brands. And I think that that's something at some point the UFC is going to get behind. Like, you got to bring these guys together and teach them, how to promote your brand, how to be authentic. Like, what about you that you can share with the world that's going to make people want to tune in for your fights outside of how good of a fighter you are? I think that that's a big part of it.
And then last one, when you talked about Colby earlier, you kind of got fired up. You're like, I don't want to talk about this anymore. Yeah. But you could see that there was the motivation there, and there was kind of like, hey, I don't necessarily have a beef with this guy, but this is a guy that I could hype up a fight with. You're taking it one fight at a time, but is there any specific name that you're like, man, me and this guy could really hype up a fight? I know, like, Kevin Holland's making a run again at 170. Yeah. I know that's one you probably want to run back at some point, but is there any name that you could be like, hey, man, I could talk some trash to this guy and we could really hype this one up?
That's just not true to who I am, honestly. It's like, if it comes organically, like, okay, if it's naturally an organic just kind of disdain for each other, then yeah, I would welcome it. But there's just a time in my career when I tried to force those types of things, and I had to eat crow for it, like the Anthony Pettis fight. I learned so many lessons from that fight, from the fight itself, from the build up to the fight. I'm just not a great trash talker when I try to force it. Like, I was trying to force myself to talk shit to a guy that I am like, Anthony Pettis. This guy's going to be a future Hall of Famer. He's an incredible fighter. I'm forcing myself to talk shit about him. It's like, it's different when you're going against a guy like Colby or Kevin, who's going to bring some heat.
I definitely need to get
that's a totally
an
different
Ethernet
scenario.
cable
For me,
to my computer.
I'm not going to force myself into a
I
situation
look like
where
doo-doo.
I'm going to start getting outside my character and talking a bunch of. It's just not who I am. It's just not. That's just not who I am. So. And it's cool to see Kevin back in the rankings. He had an incredible fight. Two of my former foes getting after it at 316 was pretty cool. I wish him nothing but the best. I think Kevin's a great guy. Colby, not so much. Nice guy off camera, dickhead on camera.
All right, that was a good interview for Michael Chiesa. Let's go ahead and go to the next